What do you genuinely not understand? How can we lose so much hair every day and still have hair stay a consistent length? Especially people who have long hair? How people get up in the morning feeling good and refreshed. I have woken up tired since before I can remember. I don't understand if they just mentally power through the tired, or if they feel something I can't. How I get taller and more handsome every time my grandma sees me. I really do not get how a needle in a record player bouncing back and forth can create such rich sound. I'm going to confuse you even more. Look up said video discs. They are basically records but are movies, and are still read by a needle. I have a said player. I have no idea how it works. It just does and it's insane. I just can't even imagine how rubbing a needle against vinyl can create a perfect replication of a sound. I get that it could make sound like a rubbing noise, but to replicate a human voice, what is happening there? A simple, and not entirely accurate, but understandable, description is just that sound is a wave. In the physics sense, when creating a record, the needle is vibrated in a manner so it exactly captures the shape of the wave the sound is making, and it etches it into the record. When you play back the record, it uses that vibration to recreate the wave, and thus it recreates the sound. The record does of course make a very quiet scratching rubbing sound, but it's the tiny movement of the needle that actually tells the record player exactly what sound to make. The YouTube algorithm. Here's a very interesting video that explains this in a fun and easy way. Long story short, nobody knows how the YouTube algorithm, or any similar algorithm, works. It just does. Let's recommend this video to everyone. In 5 years, and again 5 years later. Also this YouTube, you can't say anything R-rated. Also YouTube, can you fenel the DFFRN sebtwena DLDORNDARELCOC? Why the F does my brain only realize I'm wrong after I've already done it? And why is the time between hitting send and realizing that was done measured in femtoseconds? It's weird since you didn't see anything wrong with it after spending 10 minutes proofreading and worrying about how the other end will interpret the message. The order of emails in a Gmail thread, the one you are looking for is always hidden somewhere in the middle. I get confused when people post screenshots of Twitter, like sometimes the reply is above the post, sometimes it's below, sometimes there's a reply both below and above the original post. I don't use Twitter so I'm just out of the loop on how it works. I used to look at the date time of each message in a thread to orient myself, until I started working with an international team and realized Gmail sometimes puts their timestamp on the message, not mine. The realization came when I was going through a chain and noticed half the messages were sent from the future. Why people when you're driving have the audacity to pull out in front of you and then drive slow ASF when there are literally no other cars around? Like just wait for me to pass if you're going to go 5-10 miles per hour under the speed limit. Waking up early, 4 AM, to go to work. Whoever invented it is an a-hole. There's a kid in my high school that lives so far away he has to wake up at 3 am to get to school on time. A considerable number of people in my country have to walk 4 hours to get to a high enough place to get a phone signal, so they can receive their homework through the phone. We're talking multiple kids that do all their homework through one phone. How some people seem to get through life without a job, with no responsibility, no money, and they're totally fine. Meanwhile, I'm busting my A trying to make a living for myself and my family and struggling like hell. This right here, I have a buddy exactly like this. He's super charismatic and just has connections that hook him up with all sorts of fun stuff. He actually wasn't that great of a friend because he would always blow everyone off because something better came along. Bitcoins and NFTs. Why it's so damn hard to be happy 95% of the time when you have a stable job, good health, family and everything. Like, I have all of the pieces but something is constantly missing. Ugh. Side note, I'm fine. It's just annoying. How electricity works. Amps, volts, watts, etc. Ugh. Amps, how many electrons flow. Volts, the force with which the generator is pushing these electrons. Watts, the amount of energy carried every second. This of course depends on the amount of electrons, so the amps, and the force they are pushed, so the volts. Watts is, if watts is the speed of energy transfer, this is the distance, That is the total amount of energy you transfer, which means that if you have 200 watts of energy available and something consumes 100 watts, you can only power it for 2 hours. If it consumes 50 watts, you can power it for 4 hours. Other ones, I'm highly entertained that Jared Sparks is getting electricity fundamentals from Giant Electron. Why the hiring process at most companies is so damn slow. Back in the 60s, you could walk into a business asking about a job on Friday and start work the following Monday. Now, despite having access to tons of information about a candidate on the internet, it takes 6 or more weeks in many cases. My ex once interviewed for a job and thought she did terrible. She never heard back at all, so accepted something else that she interviewed for at the same time. They called her almost 2 months later to tell her they had accepted her and she had the job. Her response: "No, I have a great job, and why would I even want to work for a place that treats a future employee like that?" They seemed generally confused that she wasn't waiting for them to call her. So, I'm a teacher, and the teacher interview process is one of the most degrading experiences I've ever been through. Before I landed my current job, I interviewed at a school. They said they were on a really short timeline to fill the position and they would let me know within a week. Cool. Week goes by and I get invited for a second interview with different people in the admin chain. Okay, that's different from what I was told, but whatever, I get it. They tell me the same thing. We're trying to fill it fast and you'll know within a week. 2 weeks go by. I'm slowly losing my mind to job hunting depression and I'm in the car with my husband when my phone finally rings. I was so overjoyed that I pulled over just to answer it. It was an invite to a third interview. WTF. Fine. Surely I must be close to the end by now. I did the third round with the same people from the first interview and get the same spiel. Shortly after this I interviewed in another school who, just after the first interview, invited me to demo a lesson a couple days later. I do that, and within that same week they call and offer me a job. A week after that, the first place emails me and invites me to demo a lesson. So the first place took a month and a half, dicking me around for a position they were apparently rushing to fill. And within all that time another school interviewed, demoed, and hired me. I told the first place politely and professionally to F off. There's so many facets to it, it's insane. For my current job, for example, 1. A third-party service contacts me telling me my resume fits their client's open position. I apply via the third-party source and after the third party sends it to the company has the third-party scheduler screening. 2. I have a 1-hour screening with the recruiter. Now from the company, the third party is no longer involved, and they say, "Yeah, you seem like a good fit. Take this skills test by Friday and send it back to me." 3. With the test taken I receive an invitation to do a second interview. A cultural interview in which multiple members of the company ask me general questions about myself, my personality, my experiences in life, how I handle situations, etc, etc. Nothing technical about it, just making sure I'm a likable person who would work well with these employees. A few days later the company tells me they'd like to do a third interview. This interview is with different members of the company and it's done to evaluate my technical knowledge in the field, how I would handle certain problem, etc, etc. 5. A few more days later they make an actual offer. The process is insane. It takes so long and is so drawn out. I've also done application processes where I have to take a video of myself responding to questions and working through technical issues, then send it back to the company where they say 30 of our employees will watch your video and rate your personality and performance in order to prevent any hiring bias. Meanwhile, the boomers in my family could walk into a law firm with no high school diploma and get a job on the spot. Those people who do parkour on high A buildings, one mistake and you're dead. Well, they get a buzz out of that feeling of risk and so they keep doing it to keep replicating that buzz. If it was safe they wouldn't do it because there would be no excitement. I think a better question is, how they don't die more frequently? This is totally due to me not looking it up, but I don't know how dry cleaning works. Understandable. It's a liquid, like a solvent, that is water free. Oh, I thought it was called dry cleaning cause they dried it up afterwards. People who don't get nervous when public speaking. It's particularly weird for me because I'm a nervous wreck right up until I actually start presenting. I once did a summer internship thing where we all had to present our stuff at the very end, and I had people years later telling me how impressed they were by my confidence. Little did they know I was strategizing ways of removing myself from the entire situation. Maybe if I just go to the bathroom and they skip me then forget to come back to me at the end, or I could pretend to have lost my voice. My intentions when doing things. It seems that I can attribute everything I do to manipulation and attention seeking, and it's kinda unsettling. Take the introspection one step further. Attention seeking and manipulation are both ways of having one's needs met. Try and figure out what you are striving for. Most people want the same basic things, essentially love and safety. Most people who employ these tactics have an external locus of identity, meaning their sense of self-worth is more informed by the reflection of worth from others rather than from their own understanding of their value. Attention seeking is very broad, but most often when I see that term used I see a person who is trying to ensure that they are recognized as a person of worth. That the people around you care about you and will show that when you need them to. Manipulation is often due to lack of trust in others meeting one's needs without coercion. Maybe because those needs are not appropriate, or not perceived to be, or the skills to ask encourage others are underdeveloped, or maybe you have people in your life who are not interested in meeting your needs when they are expressed in appropriate ways. Everything we do is meant to meet some need, often trivial but sometimes foundational. Try and understand what need or value could prompt your actions. It can be very helpful in finding better ways to meet them and to understand yourself. Assess if the people in your life would be willing and capable of meeting your needs appropriately. A therapist can be a huge help for both of these. And remind yourself that you are human. You have needs and have found effective ways of meeting them. Ways that likely have been ingrained since you were a kid. Once you better understand those needs, you can start finding better ways to meet them. Most importantly, be compassionate with yourself as you explore this. You are human and doing the best you can to survive and be whole. Good luck. It's good to recognize it when it happens, but maybe some of it is just persuasion, the kind and fair cousin of manipulation, where in the latter there's a direct or indirect threat playing on fears of the other person. As for attention seeking, you can try to limit it, but don't dwell on it too much. People usually punish the extreme attention seekers in one form or another. How people are capable of learning activities that require repetition to get better at, like art. I seem to never develop any muscle memory at all, and even without that issue there's still the problem of not having a structured, trivial to follow path to follow, without which I never really remember anything. Art is highly technical actually. Even if you can't draw a straight line to save your life, learning the elements of art will help. Then you can focus on correcting your inability to draw straight. Stocks, investments, inflation, interest rates, etc. Or anything to do with finance. Really, that stuff is so confusing to me. Bitcoin mining, solving algorithms, what, who, why? Imagine if keeping your car idling 24/7 produced solved Sudokus you could trade for heroin. Finally an explanation that makes sense. I like the analogy, although it's more like strapping a brick to the gas pedal and letting the car run at full force. No, generating endless random numbers, combining them with the result of an arbitrary mathematical operation with a small amount of data from a previous block in the chain, and ignoring all results other than the one that matches a very specific, very difficult, but entirely arbitrary rule, leading number of zeros in the result for BTC. As in 0x0000012345. All this work to make it impractical, the same way cracking passwords is, for any one person to commit fraud on the network even without a central authority, because the cost is prohibitively high. Space. It makes my brain hurt trying to figure out things like stars and black holes etc. The size and distances with space are hard to fathom. The time it takes to get anywhere is depressing. Oh. You mean the whole concept of being frozen on a spaceship in your mid-20s to wake up 200 years later, hopefully, outside Jupiter and realizing everyone you knew is dead? The sizes and distances of it all is absolutely mind-boggling. It's so massive and far that it has to be measured in the amount of distance that light can travel in a year, and light travels 186,000 miles per second. I feel so insignificant just thinking about it, but it can also be kind of comforting in a way. Because that means that all my problems are also insignificant in the grand scheme of things. If the moon were only 1 pixel. Sudden motivation at midnight. I've read that it's due to there being no pressure or thoughts of what could go wrong. This is due to the fact that the motivation is typically for things that would be in the future or carry over into the future, and there is no reason to start or finish the things being thought of at that moment. Makes sense. I've always associated successful people with the lack of fear of failure. Quantum physics, but mostly how there could ever be a smallest thing, like everything is made up of something else. Zooming down, how could there be something that's not made up of smaller parts, like string theory, right? Smallest thing is supposed to be vibrating strings of energy? Like what is that energy made of? I don't get it. Want to not understand even more stuff? Loop quantum gravity. The usual quantum mechanics is insufficient. We need a field description. Quarks, the basic building blocks of ordinary matter, cannot exist as blocks. They always have to be making something up. These things are pretty much the visible edge of our knowledge in physics, or our hopes for what could be on the other side of the boundary. Obviously, these notions are not necessarily complete, except for QFT, which is incredibly accurate. The existence of quarks as the basic building blocks is only correct until we find evidence against it. What I find amazing about physics is that it's becoming more and more about asking the right questions. One good what if question can unlock secrets to things we didn't even know we didn't understand, and possibly even give us insight on things we knew about but could not explain. My favorite example, how general relativity explained the precession of the orbit of Mercury around the sun, all the while gifting us with black holes and all the other crazy stuff. Don't believe a word a quark says. Got it. Why do people who seem miserable as parents decide to have more kids? I'd like to direct this question towards the parents I currently nanny for. The father clearly doesn't like his kids. Has said before he never even wanted kids. And yet they have three children that are quite honestly some of the worst behaved kids I've ever worked with. And I've been working with kids in and out of a school setting going on 15 years now. Why didn't you stop after the first one? Wife wants kids. Has an unloving husband but thinks it's too late to start over. Husband who doesn't want kids wants to give his wife something to keep her busy because being married is a part of his image and social standing, and makes enough money he figures wife and nanny can raise kids without him being involved too much. Wife is happy each time a baby is born, but quickly resets to the base level of unhappiness she normally has in her marriage. Continues to have more, hoping to eventually fill the void, but unsurprisingly loses interest in her kids as well because they are band-aids for her misery, not fixes. Nanny proceeds to raise kids alone. Wife starts a daytime affair and calls it going to the gym. Husband doesn't care because his nighttime affair is called working late. That's the worst version I could imagine for you. It's the puppy principle. They want something to love, something that loves them, but once the potty training and the cost and the medical stuff comes up, it's all just a in the moment decision. That no concept of an absolute position in space exists. Oh, for FS sake, my day was going so well. Thanks for that. If it helps, we have lots of guideposts. Pulsars spin very consistently and we have documented and mapped out a lot of them. We can use these as place markers to orient ourselves if we ever become a galaxy-faring species. Big if there. And the point of space you are in right now, you will never occupy again. Not tomorrow when the Earth rotates. Not next year on the same day of the same month. Not ever. That is why one of the biggest problems of time travel would be not when, but where you are going. If you travel 6 months back in time, you would end up in the middle of space, because the Earth would be on the other side of the Sunday. The stock market. I'll try and elify this. You have a nice little company. You decide, hey, I'm going to let anyone buy a little piece of my business. It'll raise a bunch of money for my company, and in exchange the buyers will own a little piece of it. You sell these little pieces of your company, shares of it, to lots of your neighbors and friends who buy these little pieces. Since they've bought these shares in your company, they also get little bonuses. Like if you make profits, you share them out with these shareholders. They can also vote on stuff that might affect the company. When you think about it, once you sell a lot of these shares, then these people sort of own the company. It's just that you run it, and you better run it well, otherwise they might vote someone else in and put them in charge. Your company is a cool little tech company. Other people think, hey, this might take off. I want a share of that. So these other people start buying these shares off your neighbors and friends, offering them more money. because they think these shares of your company will be worth more in the future. It's far easier to do this on some sort of market rather than buying from your neighbors and friends directly. There's a market for these shares and shares of other companies. It's called the stock market. People buy and sell shares of companies on that market depending on what's happening in the world. So for example, a pandemic hits. They think, hey, loads of people will be staying at home. They'll probably be watching a whole ton of Netflix. I bet Netflix will get loads more subscribers. So I am going to buy Netflix shares because I think it's gonna go up, and that's what they do. This is well explained, thank you. My understanding of it is it works because everyone says it does. All money works that way. Why does the word fridge have the letter D in it, while refrigerator does not? This I didn't realize that. I only know it because I've typed refrigerator and gotten the squiggly red line about a million times lol. Fridge as we know it was likely spoken out loud well before it was written. At first, some people did write it as frig as well, but it's thought fridge ended up being used to follow the pattern of other English words. For example, bridge. So what you're really saying is, bridge is short for abridgerator? Chemistry. I only passed because my professor curved every F to a C. You got an. Your genius knows no bounds. My best friend has her PhD in organic chemistry and she gave me her dissertation in a bound book. Made the mistake of opening it once and was like, what the hell? This is all gibberish. Yeah, I have a master's in mathematics and have read a few dissertations and some published research. Half of the work is using words I've never even seen before and the other half is in Martian hieroglyphics. It was at that point I said no and left my PhD program with a master's. How light is both a particle and a wave? It's neither. It's something that we don't have a word for and that doesn't exist in a way that we can sense directly. But this unnamed thing happens to act in a way similar to a wave in some situations and like a particle in others. A cylinder will roll like a sphere in one direction but not roll like a cube in the other. That doesn't make it a sphere and a cube at the same time. It makes it something different. Such a great answer. Thank you. That cylinder analogy is great. Thank you. Your username is not on point. Do you know how fast you were going? Heisenberg, Schrödinger, and Omar in a car and they get pulled over. Heisenberg is driving and the cop asks him, do you know how fast you were going? No, but I know exactly where I am. Heisenberg replies. The cop says you were doing 55 in a 35. Heisenberg throws up his hands and shouts, great. Now I'm lost. The cop thinks this is suspicious and orders him to pop open the trunk. He checks it out and says, do you know you have a dead cat back here? We do now, a-hole, shouts Schrödinger. The cop moves to arrest them. Ohm resists. Not my joke but thought you would enjoy it. People that treat everybody around them terribly then complain that nobody likes them. People that proudly say, yeah, I'm an a-hole. Had an acquaintance that proudly and giddily said, I'm toxic. I left fast. After waiting in a long line to check out. Why is it that people don't have their money ready? They get to the register and have to search for a credit card or look for coupons. All that time in line they could have had it organized and ready to go. How plastic and metal can store information and magically make all sorts of things appear on a piece of glass. How these dogs that have these dense bangs hanging over their eyes can see a single goddamn thing. I work with dogs, and there's a family with 2 Maltese. One they keep very trim with no bangs around the eyes. The other one they keep with very long, dense bangs. It took me a while to realize that the one with bangs had no eyes. They keep the bangs long because it's less alarming and people don't ask as many questions. LMAO. Like Mac from Old Friends Senior Dog Sanctuary. I had an iconic reply to a comment lamenting how the poor thing couldn't see anything because they don't trim his bangs. Mac has no eyes. Ask the emo kids. I worked with a guy who used to have emo side bangs in high school. He told me he couldn't see for 2 years. They can't see much with them but dogs rely much more on hearing and smell so it shouldn't be a huge deal to them but I bet they would prefer being able to see. Although I think a lot of the grooming styles where the eyes are covered are mostly for show dogs and when they are not being shown have a little top knot. Why do I trust myself to fail so much and like myself so little? Why do I hate positive attitude advice from people?